Let's consider the battle formations of our smallest and most valuable fighting unit, the Rifle Squad. At the very beginning, I want to stress this point. There are only two basic formations of the squad column and the skirmish line. There are other formations, of course, but these two are basic. Another formation, for example, is the Squad Wedge. This is merely a combination of the squad column and the skirmish line. We will consider various formations, but the big thing to remember is this. The squad column is a safe, sound, and sensible formation to use in the approach march. The skirmish line is the formation to fight in. Now, let's study the details of these prescribed formations and see why they are used and when they are used. First, we'll take the squad column, or as the manual calls it, the closed squad column. Here is a platoon in a line of squad column with scouts out. Notice how these squads are disposed. This one is following a small stream. This one is moving along the edge of a woods. A small hill protects this one from frontal observation. Let's take a closer look at one of these squads. Here, for instance, is a small stream bordered with trees and undergrowth. It runs in the general direction of the advance. This squad leader will take advantage of the concealment it affords. Here is a small hill directly in the line of advance of this squad. The squad leader will move forward under the protection afforded by this mask, but he will not move over the hill. Instead, he will move around it, taking advantage of the concealment afforded by the scattered undergrowth near the bottom. Here is a road junction that is being plastered with artillery fire. The squad leader sees that the area covered by artillery fire is small. Therefore, he will merely lead his squad around the danger area using the cover and concealment available. This method of handling the squad looks simple, doesn't it? In fact, it is just that simple. For the squad column is the easiest and simplest of all the squad formations to control. The squad leader merely picks the best route of advance and his squad follows it. It's this ease of control that makes the squad column the ideal formation to use in conditions of low visibility, such as an advance at night, or through heavy smoke or fog, or dense woods. In such conditions, the squad closes up to avoid losing contact, like this. In some situations, the wise squad leader will even require each man to hold on to the shoulder or the belt of the man ahead, as this squad is doing.
Grab a hold of each other's belts.
Remember the lesson. At night, always use the squad column and keep it closed up tight. This is one extreme of the squad column, a column of files closed up behind their leader. At the other extreme is the so-called opened squad column. Watch how this squad opens. Don't get the idea that this is a separate and distinct formation. It's merely the squad column opened out. This formation is useful in crossing very open terrain like this. When there is no cover or concealment available, we must rely on a dispersed formation like this for protection against long-range fires that may suddenly be loosed against us. This is the way the rifle platoon looks in a line of opened squad columns. You should now have a clear picture of the squad column, its flexibility, and its uses. If there are any questions about the squad column, now's the time to ask them, because I'm going to ask you plenty of them before this period's over. Still no questions? Okay, then let's take a look at the wedge. This is the wedge. Compare it with the squad column you see here. Since the wedge is only half as deep as the squad column, And since the men are already partially deployed, the wedge can form a skirmish line to the front and go into action faster than the squad column. Watch. Your platoon leader may prescribe the squad wedge in two general situations. First, he may order you to use the wedge instead of the open squad column to cross open terrain like this. Second, when it appears to him that he must soon enter the firefight, he may order the squad wedge as a preliminary step to complete deployment. Since the wedge is essentially a formation of readiness, it finds its greatest usefulness when the squad is acting alone. But when the squad is acting alone, another vital factor at once presents itself. That factor is security. In such situations, the responsibility for security rests squarely with the squad leader. He must take steps to protect his squad from surprise in all directions, front, flanks, and rear. For example, a squad out on patrol mission might be disposed like this. Two scouts move well ahead, following the line of advance the squad leader has indicated. One of these scouts always remains within sight of the squad leader and within sight of the other scout. The squad leader protects his flanks by sending one man well to the right and one to the left. These men move to high points along the flanks where they get an extended view. The squad leader may direct them to investigate dangerous localities on the flanks while the rest of the squad remains under cover. Another man, usually called the getaway man, is designated to protect the squad from surprise attack from the rear. The remainder of the squad usually moves in a rough wedge formation like this. Here is the picture as a whole. This is all I want you to remember about the wedge. It's a good formation to use when you're acting alone because it's a formation of readiness. But don't forget that when the squad is acting alone, you must dispose your men to provide for all-around security. Are there any questions?
Yes, sir.
Sergeant?
I don't see much difference between the open squad column and the wedge.
There isn't much, Sergeant. Remember I said at the beginning of this period that there are just two basic formations of the squad column and the skirmish line. In the approach march, we really only need the squad column. But when the squad's acting alone, the squad wedge is not as vulnerable as the squad column in the event of ambush. That's the point I want you to remember. Does that answer your question?
Yes, sir.
Good. That brings us down to our last formation, the skirmish line. It is clear to all of us, I think, that in this formation, this platoon could not bring its weapons to bear on any enemy to the front. To bring its firepower into action, it must fan out, or as we call it, deploy. This is a skirmish line, the fighting formation of infantry the world over. Whenever we come to grips with the enemy, this is the formation we always use. Let's move in and take a close look at one squad. The first thing I want you to notice is this. These men are not in a straight line. The battlefield is no place for nicely dressed lines. Next, notice that these men are not precisely spaced at 5-pace intervals. Their spacing depends largely on the cover and concealment available. Here, for instance, almost 8 paces separate these two men. Why? Because there is no cover or concealment at a shorter interval. Only 3 paces separate these two men, but each has a good, well-concealed firing position. Remember this. One of the quickest ways in the world to commit suicide is to lie on a modern battlefield in a position lacking both cover and concealment. Drive that point home to your squads at every opportunity. We also use the skirmish line to advance the attack. This may be done by short squad rushes like this. One squad rushes while the others increase their fire to cover it. But more frequently, we advance the attack by rushing forward small groups of 2, 3, or 4 men. Such groups are less conspicuous and harder to hit. It might work, Corporal, but it's risky. And in war, we don't take chances unless we have to. Here, for instance, is what might happen to your squad. Your scouts cross. They follow your instructions, find these 2 little groves free of the enemy, and signal you forward. They move on up the slope. Your squad leaves its concealed position in the woods and starts across the bridge. Just as you reach the far end with your squad strung out behind you on this bridge, this well-concealed light machine gun section lets you have it, with this result. Or this might happen instead. I'm not going into the tactics of this little situation, or the use you made of your scouts. Here are the things I want you to remember about the skirmish line. 1, deploy your skirmishers to fight. 2, see that each man has a position affording cover or concealment or both. 3, watch out for bunching. 4, the skirmish line is the most difficult squad formation to control. Therefore, do not use it for long advances or for movement at night. This completes the 3 formal formations of the squad: the squad column, the squad wedge, and the skirmish line. Are there any questions about any of them? Are there any questions about how we use them and why we use them? A smart class. Well, I'll have a question to ask you in a moment or two, but first I want to make this point. We have gone over these 3 formations in some detail. They are the only formations the book prescribes. From that fact, some of you have probably formed the idea that there can be no other formations. If you have formed that idea, you're wrong. Get rid of it fast. In a fight, particularly a fight where you're on your own, you will have to dispose your men to meet the situation that confronts you. For example, your disposition or formation in one situation might be this: a rough circle. In another situation, it might be roughly an L, like this. Or the squad might be separated, like this. Part of it deployed and firing against this enemy group, while the other part moves to outflank it. In other words, a combination of the offensive and defensive. More than one squad leader has even found a formation like this highly effective and somewhat surprising to a careless enemy.